All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome wherever you are. I hope you are all still staying well and safe and staying connected. I'm Rana el Kaliouby. Welcome to my virtual book tour, my weekly check-in with everybody and kind of sharing my thoughts around the book and Girl Decoded, which has gone live as of last week. So we're a week into it. Both in the US and internationally. A lot of people have started reading it, and I've started to get and hear feedback from you all around how the book is resonating, which is awesome. Please keep that feedback coming in. I love to hear from you all. And if you are reading the book and are open to reviewing it, please do so. These reviews on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, and other retailers are really meaningful and helpful. As you may know by now, so much of my journey was marked by my identity, in particular being a woman in a male-dominated tech industry. And as a result, I'm super passionate, and I'm a passionate advocate for diversity in technology, because I firmly believe that the more diversity we have around the table, the better the technologies that we design are going to be. We all have a variety of blind spots, and we design for what we know. So the more diversity we have, the more creativity and innovation we will get. And so I am super excited to have Pam Kostka joining me today. She is a multiple-time CEO, and she's now the CEO of Always, a nonprofit organization on a mission to bring diversity to the tech industry, and in particular support female founders and female investors and funders. Last fall, Always started a Boston chapter, and I remember getting a call from Pam, and she shared with me the mission for Always and invited me to join the steering committee for the Boston chapter. And I remember saying, Pam, I think I should say no because I'm really busy with the book and Affectiva, but the mission just resonated so much with me. And I feel very grateful to be part of that community, and I've learned a lot. And it's just been a wonderful, part. It's been wonderful to play part of Always' mission. So, Pam, thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit more about Always. You have been there for just over a year.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me today. It's my pleasure to be here. And to talk to you and to the audience. And we're so glad to have your voice in the Always community as well. So it has been a year since I joined, although Always has been around since technically late 2017. It came out of basically the Me Too movement that happened in Silicon Valley at that time. And about 30 plus women in venture and some female founders, notable and iconic female founders, got together and said, we think this is the time for change. We've all experienced in our careers what it means to be a woman in a very male-dominated industry, and it's time for a new normal, a new version of visionary, as we like to say. And so from that, the organization was born. And one of our principles is that we are really trying to rewire the tech industry from the inside. Mm-hmm. And to take people who have power and influence, and one of the core cultural values we have is that power and influence should be shared out with other people of power and influence, and specifically, and to create that new infrastructure of power and influence. And so specifically that means to approach people who've traditionally been viewed as outsiders to the kind of the Caucasian male insider, kind of homogeneity that exists in tech industry today. So we launched in 2017. We've been moving aggressively forward ever since, with a dual focus on female founders and female investors as well. And we believe that the dual focus of that, while it kind of breaks a kind of startup ethos of focus on one, we believe that the most traction that we will get in seeding a new flywheel, if you will, within the industry is by focusing on moving both dials simultaneously for the maximum impact.
I love the dual support, and I think it's really important to kind of cover all aspects of the ecosystem. So in my book, I talk about my personal experience raising money as a female founder. Over 10 years ago, Ross Picard, who's an MIT professor and my co-founder, and I did the Sand Hill Roadshow. So we flew out to the Bay Area. We had a whole bunch of investor meeting lined up. And I remember we literally had 0 meetings with any female investors. It was all your typical white, older white guy kind of investment community. And to make things worse, or more challenging, here we were, 2 women coming out of academia. I wore a hijab, so I was clearly Muslim at the time. And we were pitching an emotion company. So we would avoid the E word at any cost. We would dance around it, but never name it. And so we must have been so different and alien to what these investors were used to. Now we persisted. We've raised over $53 million of venture and strategic funding. But even like 18 months ago, our most recent round, again, it's pretty dismal. Like very, very few female partners. This time around, I was more adamant to bring in investors that kind of cared about diversity. So we brought in Trend Forward Capital and Motley Fool Ventures, and they both have amazing female partners who are very involved and empowered. But it's not the norm. So can you say a little bit about the numbers, like how much funding is going to female founders, and what is All Raised and the community doing about it?
One of the things that we did when we started was to focus on data, because we think data is power. And by shining a light on where the industry is, we can hold ourselves as an organization accountable, and we can hold the industry at large. And that's not to say that when we report the numbers, the danger is that people think like we claim success for every progress forward or failure for every step back. But we really are just trying to report the numbers in many ways, and then obviously tailor our impact to have the best drive towards those. But when it comes to venture funding, it's not surprising to me that you have the experience you had. We just updated our numbers. 68% of venture capital firms still don't have a single female partner. So the odds of you walking in and finding somebody are still pretty low. You have to be intentional about doing that. And we think that's an important part of like how we organize our community too, is that founders have a voice in this. Founders are the oxygen or the lifeblood of the venture community. And so when you vote with who, when you have an option, because we realize that all founders don't always have an option, but when you have an option to take a term sheet from a firm that has diversified, we think that's going to be a benefit to you. And then you vote in that way as well with who's in your cap table. And already that's starting to change kind of what we call this flywheel of where the economics go. But we do see light spots. When we started, 9% of check writers, we say people who can write an independent check and sit on a board. They have investing authority, if you will. So only 9% of check writers were women. Today, that's raised up to 12%. So we are we've made some progress forward. And yet we also look at 68% of firms still don't have a single female check writer. But we are seeing forward progress. Those who have invested and hired and engaged with general partners who are women are now seeing the benefits of doing so, right? And so we're seeing not just one, not the token female at the table, but we're seeing multiple women now at the table, and from some firms that we didn't necessarily think that would happen from. So that's the good news. And last year we saw 54 new partners or GPs who were women, which was a record for the industry. So we're super excited about that. We clearly have some concerns going forward with what we call preventing the backslide. So we don't want to see that these women in a downturn are the first people to be let go, for example. So we're very cognizant of that fact. On the female founding side, there's been less progress, and that's been super frustrating. So in 2018, it was about 11.3%, I believe, went to female founders. And so we take a broader lens. There's lots of numbers out there. There's female founder only, female founder CEO only, and just a female founder. She could be a chief product officer. She could be the COO, the president, the CEO. It doesn't matter what role she has. We take that broader lens because we believe it's the diversity of the team that brings the value. So as long as she's on the founding team and has a major percentage in the cap table from an equity position, that's where we look and measure. So 11.3% in 2018, only up to 11.8%. So half a percentage point movement. And those are, if we look back, two of the most historically largest years in venture capital for dollars deployed. That's just paltry movement forward. We need to do better. And that's a choice of focus. And there's a couple of things that we believe are driving that, and we're picking at it, but we want to keep the focus on the fact that we need to be giving more money to women, and underrepresented women in particular, because they're especially well hit. And then when we kind of talk about impact going forward, that's another area of concern where we're like, okay, if all we could do is 11.8% or in the last year, we need to do better. But I also believe that there's an opportunity to do better as we move forward.
So of the VC firms that have female partners, do we have any evidence that they are investing more in female founders or female-led companies?
We're always careful to say that, you can't draw the one-to-one corollary and analogy, because we're not trying to create the inverse of women invest in women. Right. What we do believe happens, though, is that the lens opens up at the venture firm. And the lens opens up in many ways. Their ability to understand different ideas that are brought to them that are not in their core experience set. The lens of the networks that are available to the company and the founders that are willing to come in. All of that opens up. And so we find that even men at venture firms that have women in them are more likely to invest in women. So it's not just women investing in women. It's really benefiting from the diversity that you spoke of. It happens on the foundry side and companies and the types of companies that are built and the way the products are built with a broader lens. Same thing happens on the venture side.
So I want to switch to what things we can do to affect change. But before we go there, can you share your own personal experience becoming a CEO?
Yeah. So my personal experience, I started in Silicon Valley as a product manager, kind of rose up in the marketing ranks to take over all of marketing, had some stints in sales as well. So I had a pretty rounded, broad background, and joined a company where I had said to the CEO, I'd worked with him before, and I said, sure, I'll come be the CMO one more time, but I kind of want to be in the passenger seat. I want to really be trained to be a CEO because that's what I want to do. And he very graciously said yes. A long story short, he ended up leaving the organization for health reasons. And that was kind of a crisis point for the organization. What were we going to do? Who were we going to be? How were we going to move forward? And the board suggested that we move into a sale for the company, and felt like there wasn't somebody in the organization who could be the CEO. Although I was kind of like, I was leaning in, I want to do it. And they appointed, the founder was still there, and they made him the founder CEO. And he just really wasn't comfortable going through a sales process. And so he said, I just don't want to be the face of the company. Pam can be the face of the company. She's really good at this. And so I basically ran the M&A process for the company. It was a great exit for the organization, in all honesty. And the board came at the closing dinner, when you do the celebration of the acquisition, they came and they said oh, we got it wrong. Turns out that you could have been the CEO of the organization, which was really kind of a moment of frustration of what kind of bias had been there, or what kind of lack of visibility had been there. And I had been in board meetings with these people. It wasn't like they didn't know me. So it was kind of an interesting, inflection point. And despite that, I still did a tour after that of venture capitalists that I knew and had been on boards with, and basically said, I want to be a CEO. Would you hire me as a CEO? Would you put me in one of your portfolio companies as a CEO? And about the fifth one of the men that I knew really well just said, Pam, I got to pull you aside and tell you, don't ask this question anymore. Yes, we would, and stop asking this question. You don't have to ask permission to be a CEO. You're qualified, you're eminently qualified to do it. And men wouldn't be doing this. And it was a real learning point for me, just in terms of, how much of my questions were because of my previous experience. Had I just been taught that I needed to ask permission because I'd leaned in, I'd said yes, and people didn't take me up on it. So I think that there's a lot of learned behavior from that, not just for me, but for other women, where I think we're told a lot that we have to be better, more qualified. We have to prove ourselves more to overcome a lot of the unconscious bias that exists in the industry.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we have to be better prepared, more prepared than the average person. And so that's one of the things I would personally love the industry to break itself of, is that a woman she's eminently qualified already, and not holding ourselves back from taking steps forward or trying for something because the industry pushes on us in a different way.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience. When we started the company, Roz and I decided to hire a kind of a seasoned business executive to run the company. And then he left after a few years. And the question was, okay, who's going to be the next CEO? And a few board members actually said Rana should, because it's her baby, it's her technology. And I had all these like inner doubts that, I'm not qualified. Like, what if I take the CEO seat and then, the company's not successful? And so I didn't raise my hand. But at the same time, our head of sales at the time, who had never been CEO either, he said, sure, I'll do it. And so he became CEO for a couple of years. And 2 years into that, I kind of just mustered all the courage I had. And I had to it was like a mind kind of reframing for myself, realizing that like you, I was doing all the I was raising money for the company. I was the face of the company. I was very intimately kind of familiar with the technology. And so I had to first convince myself. And then once I did that, it was a lot easier to bring the board and my team kind of on board with that. And my biggest learning from that was, there are already a lot of obstacles for women to overcome. Don't be your own biggest obstacle in a way.
So important. It's such an important lesson, because once I turned that corner, I was like, well, I'm the CEO. I'm not going back, right? There's just there's a difference in the approach. And I think it's true for anybody. If you're looking, should I apply for that job? Apply for the job. Like you don't have 100% of the criteria. Nobody has 100% of the criteria. Nobody's a perfect fit for that. And so don't hold yourself back from doing something. At least lean in. My experience was a little bit bad because I leaned in and then nobody took me up on it. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so there's enough obstacles out there, to your point. Don't be another one. Don't raise the bar even higher because you're not even you're presenting your own first obstacle.
So can we talk about the role of the network versus kind of working hard? To your point, women just to solve this, we're just working harder and harder and harder. But there's also a role for the network, right?
Absolutely. There's working hard. One of my favorite quotes that Telly Whitney, who was the former CEO of Anita Borg, would say, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, but who knows what you know, right? So there's this magical, you have to be good and competent at your job. You are that. But you have to get out there and meet people. And so networks are so important. And one of the things that we try to work on at Allraise is accessibility to networks. We realize that a lot of networks are closed off. Mm-hmm. But it is also true that studies will show that women are much more likely to, because we have so many responsibilities, because we have home responsibilities, job responsibilities, but we have a tendency to just put our heads down and work really hard. And if I do a really good job, they'll find me and my expertise will shine through. And I think if we look at how it works today, that's not necessarily true. It is as much about who you know and who knows you as it is what you're capable of doing. And so get out there and network. Get out there when it's 5 o'clock and you could do one more hour on your project, or you could go to that meetup or that cocktail hour. Go to the cocktail hour. Go to the meetup. Go have those networks. And if you're feeling awkward about that, come to organizations like Allraise and other places where we will facilitate that access, because we do realize that again, it's not like my experience. Sometimes you lean in and there's nothing there. So we want to make sure that we're also breaking down networks. And, whether you're going to be a founder, you don't want to be having that first relationship or first conversation with someone when you're asking them for money, right? Build a relationship with them beforehand. Go meet, it's who's going to be your VP of sales. You're going to be talking. You want people who are VPs of sales in your network long before you need them. And so you want to be building this relationship long before you have to ask for something from that relationship. So it's just so important to get out there. Knowledge is, and competency is a requirement, but not the only thing to do. And so it does frustrate me to hear sometimes that we spend a lot of time, and this is especially true when women want board seats, we spend a lot of time training ourselves how to be board ready. But men don't do that. I love organizations like Athena Alliance and Board List because they are providing an invaluable service. You want to know how to be the best you can be when you're there. But men don't do that. They kind of learn on the fly. And we are perfectly capable and equally capable of on-the-job training to do something. So it is more about making sure you have access to the opportunities as they arise, and that your internal monologue doesn't tell you to walk away from that. Or if it does, you just push past that internal monologue.
Right. So let's talk about the role of men in all of this. I know always kind of, we bring in male allies to be part of the community. So what's your take on that?
Male allies are so important to everything that we do. We're not, at All Raise, we always say we're not going to change. First of all, we're not building the mirror image. We're not building like, hey, let's make this a woman-driven thing as opposed to men. So we're very cautious about that. Men hold the power and influence. And what we want to say right now is like, there's a sharing of that power and influence. And all the economics of diversity show that the sharing of power and influence with diversity will create a bigger pie, not a reslicing of the pie. So anybody who's sitting there worried about like, ooh, I'm about to lose something, that's not true. The pie's going to get bigger. Love that Morgan Stanley, I think it was last year, came out with $4.4 trillion worth of value can be created from, investing in diversity, whether that's investing in more diverse founders, whether that's building more diverse teams. $4.4 trillion can be unlocked. That is, larger than the California economy. And we're like the 5th largest economy in the world. So there's a lot of value that can be had in there. Many women that I speak with will always point to, there was somebody, a mentor, both male and female, but largely male because it is a male dominated environment, that opened doors, that created opportunities, building on that networking, created opportunities for them. So it's super important for us to do that. We get asked all the time, I certainly do, I'm sure you do, how can I help?
Right.
Sometimes that's just a question like, how are you today? There's not a genuineness behind it, but most of the time there is a genuineness behind that. And what I say to male allies is there are small actions you can take, the daily actions that you can take, and there are bigger actions that you can take. And so engaging in those smaller actions daily to kind of overcome mansplaining that's happening, or manels is another one. We say just refuse to
manels, right?
A manel is like an all male panel. Right? We're seeing a lot of manels right now. We're always like, just say no. Just like, hey, just ask the question. Are there any women that are going to be on this panel? I really don't feel comfortable being on a panel without there being a woman on the panel. Are there any underrepresented individuals on the panel? I don't feel comfortable not being on a panel. The next step further from that is like, if they say no, say, well, I know a great person. Would you like, I'd be happy to do this if you also allow Rana to come to the panel, right? Like have Rana on the panel too. And so we're looking for those types of activities. And we believe that in the community, it's so important. The community is growing, and there are many men who care about making this change and affecting this change. And it's one of choice, it's one of focus, and it's also one of unifying collectively the community around it. And so they're important voices, integral to the process. I'm sure you could speak about amazing women who have sponsored you and supported you and created opportunity for you from, early in your career to the board members you have today.
Yeah, and one person in particular, I want to give a shout out to Andy Palmer. He was Affectiva's first advisor. So I met with him over 10 years ago, and he's just been a phenomenal mentor and advisor, and a great supporter of female founders. I think he coaches and mentors a lot of the female founders in the Boston area. And it's just wonderful to have that relationship where it's safe, and, he cares both about kind of my professional growth, but also my personal well-being. And I think that's been wonderful to have an ally like that and a mentor like that. We need more Andys for sure.
Yeah. So any men out there who are listening today, like, email me at Allraise, reach out to somebody in your network. If you don't have a network, make it an objective this year. I'm a big person that believes in OKRs, and what we don't measure, we won't achieve. So if you set it as an objective to meet 5 new women, or to sponsor or mentor a woman or an underrepresented founder, then it will happen, if you put it down as a measure, a metric that you want to drive towards.
So I want to switch gears to COVID and, the global pandemic we're in. You wrote an excellent article, an op-ed in Fast Company, just sharing your concerns about us going back or sliding back with this global pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about what's worrying you, what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, this is a tough time. I've lived through 2 downturns in the technology industry. And this one has a different feel to it, if for no other reason than we're talking about loss of human life. And then just as we try to flatten the curve, the amount of impact that we're feeling across the industry is just, this is a huge economic hit, global economic hit, not just in the US. And so that weighs heavily on everybody, but we're seeing disproportionately that women are impacted by this for a number of reasons, from the fact that they are now school teachers at home, cafeteria ladies at home. They have more responsibilities at home. But they're also, women were underfunded to begin with. We talked about this. Capital was hard to come by for a woman to begin with. Jane VC has done some amazing work recently that show that for every dollar that a man raises in the seed in the early stage, Series A woman raises 38 cents, and an underrepresented woman raises 2 cents.
Crazy.
This is a lot, and those were in the good days. And so what can happen to a woman now? And so as everybody's going through their cost cutting exercises, for example, and re-examining budgets, a woman has already been forced to operate very capitally efficient. She's already lean. She doesn't have fat to cut. She wasn't necessarily giving a free lunch every week. She wasn't. She was taking cuts, and so she faces cutting to the bone if we're not careful. And then we talked also about the women in venture, 54 women. What I don't want to see is LIFO, last in, first out, right? That if the venture firms have to start cutting, or that a disproportionate number of women are actually emerging fund managers. So they're in smaller funds. And as the LPs kind of pull back and wait to see what happens economically, what happens to their access, the venture access to capital. And so those are all things that literally do keep me up at night, and that we have to stand united to fight against. Focus, but we're also looking at organizing our community. How do we get commitments and pledges from people in our community and organize our community to say that this isn't, that D&I would be too easy to let go as we're looking at things. And so we cannot, the risk of falling back to our typical pattern recognition modalities puts us all at risk of moving forward. But from it, I also see opportunity, right? So I have this deep concern about backsliding, right? But I also see opportunity, and that out of this horrible recession will come a new generation of companies.
Yeah.
This is where, the next Facebook, the next Google, we're going to see it born right here and right now. And so we have a choice to make about which companies we invest in, what type of founders we invest in. So there's an opportunity for us, how those founders build their companies. So who funds them, who founds them, how we build them. This is a chance for us to change kind of the DNA of the Valley right here, right now, and the tech ecosystem. And so I have a lot of hope as well. So a lot of, we got to promote the backslide, but a lot of hope as well for how we can look And it will start at the seed and those early stage. So all those early stage founders who are out there, this is going to be your moment.
Yeah.
And there is funding that's going. I mean, funding's been slower. It's dried up. It will take you longer. The valuations will not be as strong as they would have been, say, 2 months ago. But there is funding that's happening.
Yeah, we and kind of a lot of the networks that I'm part of. What I'm seeing is that it's going to become harder to raise money, given the economic conditions. But there is definitely, I think it's easier to raise money if you're looking for seed investment than if you're looking for later stage funding. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. The later stage funding, companies have chosen to stay private a lot longer in some ways. And so we created like a whole new late stage economy, these mega rounds of 100 million plus that we're going into companies. Those are going to be harder to come by. Venture debt is going to be more important. I think we're all going to learn about all the various instruments that we have available to us from a funding perspective. It is going to be tougher. The earlier you are in your process, this is a great time to start a business because you get to be heads down and focused on building out your product so that when the economic rebound happens, and it will happen, that you're maximized in your positioning to take advantage of it. And so there's lots of, we're learning a lot about how education is going to change, how healthcare is going to change. There's a lot of opportunity that exists out there right now. And there are amazing funding sources that are available and ones that are more and more egalitarian than ever. And if you check out my post in Fast Company, we list a couple of them that are really kind of interesting approaches to how people are supporting funding and fast funding. This is like day zero funding or within 9 days. Submit your business plan 9 days later. We'll tell you whether or not you have a check, $1 million, $2 million check written to you. I mean, those are amazing. So I think even the venture industry is getting creative about how they're going to go after some of these opportunities, knowing that there is gold to be had in how we're going to build out this next generation.
So we are getting a lot of questions, and there's a common theme around leadership in times of COVID and the global pandemic. So I talk a lot about empathetic leadership, and I feel that it's especially important right now to lead with empathy and just be human in how we connect with our teams and our partners and our clients. Wanted to get your thoughts on this concept of empathetic leadership and being vulnerable, and whether it's perceived differently if you're a woman leading with empathy versus if you're a man leading with empathy.
I think it's probably easier. Honestly, this is one of the times when it's easier to be empathetic, like to lead with empathy as a woman than it is a man. It just comes a little bit more naturally, I think, because of societal pressures, if nothing else, about like how we're supposed to lead. There's lots of studies that show that women are often called upon to be leaders in times of crisis. And that is what we're in. And so for a multitude of reasons, women, the upside of a woman having to be more capital efficient, even in robust times, is that she knows how to be capital efficient in this time. So this is not a skill she has to learn. This is well-honed capability that she has. So we start there. But from empathetic and authentic, I think culture has been becoming more and more prominent, even before COVID-19, the importance of culture and authenticity of leadership and leading with the heart as well as the mind and the books, if you will. And so I think that this is just highlighting and maybe cementing in the importance of that type of change in leadership and giving an opportunity for women to step forward because that type of leadership is valued. And so it's very important. And people can smell it when you're not authentic. People can feel it. It's not something that you can try on. It's not something that you can act. It's something genuine. It's something from the heart. And I think there's nothing more important. We're all uncertain. And unfortunately, even as a leader, you can't make declarative statements because tomorrow we could have new information. So just staying connected to your employees is so important. on a daily and a regular basis to provide at least as much community as you can, because certainty is something that you probably can't give them right now.
Yeah, I've been finding that starting with empathy and just kind of acknowledging that everybody's going through their own challenges right now, and just kind of starting with that point, but pairing it with transparency. And a lot of it is we just don't know. But also action, like empathy and kind of being, human doesn't mean that we're just sitting, we're laying back. I'm pairing it with like, we are forging ahead, we're marching ahead, we're going to hit our product goals and our business goals, and and be agile in how we respond to this, but doing that with compassion.
I just think that focus and energy is so important. Otherwise, we see, work expands to fit the time available. So like having something to drive towards, having something to work towards is purpose. And I think we're all looking for purpose right now.
Definitely. Okay, so a few more questions. Any advice on how long it will take to go back to normal life?
Oh, I wish I had the crystal ball. I don't have any, each state is taking a different approach. I have relatives in Texas, they're opening up. We just got told here in California that we have another 5 weeks minimum. It's going to be staged. I just hope that we do, we're all learning. The epidemiologists are learning, the government is learning. Like we don't have a playbook that we can rely on right now. And so I don't know when the recovery is. Typically these things do take time to work themselves out. So 12 to 18 months at a minimum. I think this one is gated by when the vaccine becomes available. And if we could have a vaccine in a year, that would be amazing. But, there's all kinds of prognostications out there. And I think the most important thing to do is to stay flexible in your planning. Hold on to your cash for as long as you can. Assume that you aren't going to raise more money right now. If you do have money, like the safest, most prudent thing to do is assume that you won't raise more money. Plan according to that. But operate your business, because if you can operate your business and show progress forward, you can also get more money. So
yeah. I mean, one thing that always happens with these challenging times is we inevitably end up with a lot of innovation. So where are the industries? This is a question from Eric. What industries do you think will be getting the money? Is it healthcare? Is it something else?
I'm hearing, that I don't have the crystal ball here either, but the most popular ones that I'm hearing people talk about is the future of work. We're all working from home. We're running this big experiment. Well, if you're working in tech, that might not seem novel to you. If you were working in other industries, it is very novel. Yeah. So certainly kind of the future of work is going to be there. I think that there's still, in VC circles, it's called the Silver Tsunami, what's happening for the aging population. And that's not just healthcare. That is, what do you do for an aging population that is at home? How do they stay engaged? How do they stay social? I think all of us are looking for what are those new social norms that are going to be coming up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on the social landscape. Healthcare certainly and education certainly are two other ones that a lot of people are talking about, like what is going to happen in those spheres. Nobody has the crystal ball, but I think those are the ones that people are looking for, like what are the connectivity apps? What are the ones that can help with distance education? What are the ones that can help with anything social for any age bracket? Some of the more exciting areas that venture is looking at.
We feel our technology has a very strong play in this new world where we are we're connecting virtually in almost all aspects of our lives, whether it's connecting with your teams and partners or your customers, or learning online like my kids are, or, connecting with your community. And I feel like this kind of technology that can capture a lot of the richness and the nonverbals has a big role to play in creating more of a shared experience. I think we're all craving this human connection and this sense of a shared experience. So it'll be interesting to see what the world looks like post-COVID. Do you have any kind of theory on what's going to persist?
I do think, will everybody now work from home in perpetuity? No. But I do think it's opened up new ways for us to think So I certainly have seen some people say we're never going back to an office, and it can save us a lot of money from doing that. I still think that people will crave interaction. We're human beings. Like the most stressful part for us is how we can interact, and some of that can be done digitally, but some of it's going to be done in real life. And so it'll be interesting to see the weaving together. But I do think Fortune 500 companies, other industry, like there has been a change in kind of the concept of what does it mean to work from home. And I think the social engagement is going to be super interesting too, where there's going to be a somewhat of a reevaluation of what's important to us and how do we have those experiences.
And then another question from Bern. Hi, Bern. Could you and Pam speak to non-US all-raise equivalents if they exist? And how do we think they might be similar or different?
Yeah, I don't know anybody that is quite like all-raise. I mean, we kind of have a white space opportunity here. It is our intention to ultimately expand, but we call ourselves a startup nonprofit. And as at any good startup, we want to start local and then expand as we can. There are definitely organizations. I just haven't gone through the research yet because we're not in that expansion mode. We're really focused here in the US. We started in the Bay Area in New York. We've expanded to Boston and LA. And now we're going to try to go to the all four corners of the United States, because we know that there is ingenuity in the Midwest. There's all kinds of great opportunities in the Northwest, in the Midwest, in the Southeast. There's opportunity everywhere. So we want to make sure that we're expanding. I unfortunately can't really name or give any shout outs to organizations. I'm sure there are amazing organizations in different geos though.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right, so to wrap things up here, what is the most inspiring or hopeful kind of story that you've seen or heard over the last few weeks that just, that shows that we're making little bits of progress?
I don't know that there's one. I will just say what always amazes me about all-raise is the community and how the community rallies. And so from the existing people who are at the table to individuals, like talk about networking, my network has probably expanded tenfold in the past 5 or 6 weeks as people raise their hands and say, I'm in and I want to help. And how can I help? And so for me, that's the most inspiring story, and why I think that my op-ed piece was really important to write. But this is not going away. Like diversity, equity, and inclusion is not going away. People care deeply at all echelons, some of the most senior people in the industry, and they're coming up with creative ways to engage and support. And so I don't want to say we're done. We are not done. We are still in the first 2 miles of this marathon that we're running. But it's really amazing to me, men and women who are coming forward from iconic companies, large venture firms, small venture firms across the board, raising their hands to get engaged and make sure that we don't have this backslide. So to me, that's the most heartwarming and promising thing, is that we are not, that there is a large number of people, there's a community, a growing groundswell of people who care about this and who are going to make a difference. So everybody's voice is important in that community.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So kind of.
And a shout out to everybody. A shout out to everybody who's been listening. Thanks for joining us today.
And just a quick shout out for all-raise. They are organizing a whole bunch of virtual events, and there's a few of them coming up, just helping female founders and funders navigate these challenging times. So check out allraise.org/events for a lineup of what's coming up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks, everybody. Bye.